Good evening, Jason. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am quite well. I've already got one bourbon under my belt, and I'm working on my second.
Oh, that's perfect. So that's a good place to start. So this is a little bit different episode of the show. And tonight I'm talking to Steve. It's 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. where he is, which he'll introduce himself in a minute. And this is an after dark episode, which means that we're having some drinks. So Steve, what are you drinking?
I am drinking. I just cracked open my anniversary present from my wife, and it is Michter's single barrel 10-year-old bourbon. It's very hard to find, and you're going to pay an upcharge for it when you do find it. And it's really quite lovely.
Nice. I am having a lovely Japanese whiskey called Akashi. It's very smooth. Having it on with a one ice cube, but on the rocks. I'm not quite the man that you are drinking it neat. But as we'll talk about the episode, I don't think I'm quite the man you are in many ways compared to what some of the things you've done. So I know we've got a lot to talk about tonight, Steve. So let's get into it. So love if you'd introduce yourself to the audience.
All right. So, yeah, Steve Drum. I currently live in Chicago. I just recently retired from the Navy after 27 years, pretty much all of that as a SEAL. I spent the last 4 years up here working at the Navy boot camp up at Great Lakes. This is north of Chicago. The last couple years, I spent working on a program called Warrior Toughness, which is essentially trying to make all of our sailors and junior officers tougher by giving them a process, a mindset like we use in the SEAL teams, along with some performance psychology and some character development. So literally, I got approached, in 2017, almost quite literally locked in a room with a clinical psychologist and a Navy chaplain and told you figure out toughness, how you're going to get after it, and
Mm,
develop the program. And, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot from my counterparts, great friendships with my chaplain and my psychologist, learned a lot about performance psychology, realized that in the SEAL teams, we'd been doing this a lot all along.
mhm.
And then years after my upbringing, they started really importing it. And so now you go back to the SEAL teams and they have, believe it or not, yoga rooms, meditation rooms. I do.
No,
Yeah.
really?
Yes, because the research,
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah. So the research proves that it's effective and it's been a game changer for me personally as well. So that's me. So now I just retired a couple weeks ago. And so now I'm building my business, which is to basically take leadership and team development concepts that I learned and used in the SEAL teams and translate them into other professional arenas that, obviously to help build and lead high performance teams, but also to, take those same concepts and techniques and use them to better people in in their personal lives as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on the successful career and your newfound retirement.
Thank you.
For those of you guys aren't gonna, you'll see his picture of Steve, but you won't see him live. He's still a very young man, so congratulations on being retired at a fairly young age. I'm jealous.
Yeah,
That's cool. Well
despite
earned.
despite my outward appearance, the body does not agree with me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'm sure we'll probably get into that just a little bit tonight. So, as we always do in the show, I always like to let the audience know how Steve and I met. So, Steve and I met through Heroic Public Speaking, and I've had a few other guests on the show, or I will have some guests on the show from that same venue. That's what I would say is the world's finest public speaking program, where people learn to become keynote speakers. That's where I met Steve. Steve has actually continued on in that program as a fellow now and teaches is there as a mentor to new people coming in through there. So it's really good to meet you. So next tradition we have on the show, Steve, is our first impressions of each other. And since you're not here locally with me, and it's my show, I'm going to have you go first.
All right.
What was your first impression of me when we met?
So if I remember correctly, you were not there for the first session, right?
That's correct. I was
Okay,
not. I was in Israel.
all right, that sounds cool. But for those that don't understand how the grad program works, and it's changed up a little bit, but first of all, I got to echo your sentiment that it is probably the world's finest public speaking education facility. And in fact, I just keep coming back for more. I just can't stay away. because of the community and obviously the quality of the coaching there as well. So
Hmm.
basically, how it was and how it mostly still is that you meet 4 times. So you have 4 sessions, 4 months in a row. You go to the facility in New Jersey for 4 days, and then you're done. So you have 4 of those sessions. And so I remember meeting you. I'm like, who's this guy? And right away, I'm like, who's the sales guy? Clearly he's going to be a public speaker who's going to conduct sales training. That's got to be what he's all about. So that was initially like very very smooth talking, you know, smooth talking northern boy. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
gotcha. Thanks. We haven't shared that before, so that's interesting to hear. So, Northern boy, former Northern boy from Minnesota, you betcha.
yeah,
Now New York, almost 15 years.
yeah,
But you can never take me out of Minnesota. I'm still a Midwesterner at heart. And you're also an East. Well, you're actually originally an East Coaster at heart. So, or you're originally from the East Coast, which we'll talk about.
yeah,
So
yeah. I'm
my
from
first,
the Philly.
yeah. So my first impression of you, and you're right, we didn't meet in November when. So you guys got a chance to get to know each other. My first impression of you was December. I remember sitting in the large room where we're all together, and you just had this stare, which I think you've been called out for this a few times. This stare to like that's the stare of a military man. Because I had heard from I actually knew somebody in the program, like we've got somebody from a couple of people from the military, from the FBI, and it was pretty apparent that you were either the FBI person or the military person based on just how you carry yourself, the intensity of the stare. And then I remember where we actually got to know each other is we had dinner with some mutual friends from the program, and if
Ginger
you
free.
would, yeah, exactly. So when you see Steve, Steve is what you like looks like a Navy SEAL, like extremely like just well built, looks like he can handle himself, and an intense stare. But once you get to know him, he's like actually like a really fun, great smile. So I think when we had dinner, you're like super friendly. We started talking sports, and my impression of you once we got talking was my first impression was, yeah, he looks like a Navy SEAL, and I don't know any Navy SEALs, and this would be I'd be scared to run into you in the dark or have you doing something to me. Once we got talking, I'm like, oh, he's just a normal guy hanging out, cool guy, great speaker, powerful. And so I think, both of our first impressions were probably accurate. I do want to correct you though, or not correct you. I'm not a salesperson anymore, which is I'm so proud to say, but I
No,
was when we
no,
first met.
I know, and no, and yeah, I remember that we had dinner at Ginger Three, the one sushi
Yeah.
place here in New Hope, and
Yeah.
yeah, and right away I'm like, this is a good guy. You're a bridge builder, you're a relationship builder, and that's your reputation, and you continue to do so with your after the course with your continued Zoom calls for the grad group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think pretty soon, we hit off a friendship. I think very quickly, and
Yeah,
so
definitely. And well, the only thing we don't have in common is you're a Bears fan. Or I forget, are you a Bears fan or an Eagles fan?
yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna get stabbed in the back for this, but yeah, I converted to the Bears while I was up.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm gonna catch a lot of hell for that.
Oof.
Well,
Oof.
because we have friends that and one of them coaches and and they're good friends, family friends, our kids are friends, and you want to see them do well, and so of course
Yeah,
that
of
trump
course.
the historic in my book at least that trumps the historic loyalties. However, I will not convert to the Blackhawks. I'll be a lifelong Flyers fan.
Yeah. Interesting. So you must have got a lot of crap last year in the Eagles Bears game with the double doink.
Yes, well, I was actually in. We were there, right? Were you? You
We
were?
were there.
Yeah,
We were watching it. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Because we were there. It was me, you, and the one other Bears fan, which was Jeannie Malnati.
Yeah.
We're the only ones there, and yeah, it was rough.
I can imagine. Well, let's get into this. I can't wait to have the audience get to know you and enjoy our conversation. So, first question for you, Steve. What is something that you nerd out about?
Hey, so it's great. We're drinking bourbon. That's kind of what I've been nerding out about lately. I've kind of built up a little collection here, but I enjoy it. I think it all started. I did was it like 2 years ago? I did a bourbon tour for a friend's birthday, and we went down there. A bunch of guys went together, and we toured a bunch of the distilleries. And that of course was fun. Of course, the camaraderie, a good group of guys was probably the driving factor and how fun it was. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just got into kind of the tasting of it and just kind of, you know, shifted from where I used to drink scotch to bourbon. And that's kind of what I do. I have, I have a collection and I'm like, oh, I love the problem of figuring out what I'm going to drink. And so,
Yeah.
and then I start drinking a little too much. And then I'm like, all right, I need to take a little hiatus and go dry for a week. And now we're breaking that only for this podcast.
Only for the podcast. So you're actually on the wagon except for this podcast. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and and dinner last night, and probably on the plane tomorrow. Yeah, but
Yeah.
other than
I,
that,
I, I felt, I
well,
felt, I
pretty
felt
much,
honored for a minute.
yeah, pretty much scratch next week too, because that'll be Christmas. But
Yeah, exactly. Steve, when I first heard you say that, I was honored that you broke your dry December for the podcast, and then you let me let me down pretty quickly there with the fact that you're actually be drinking a lot of bourbon and you have been drinking a lot of bourbon. Thanks for trying to make me feel good for a minute, though. I appreciate
I
it.
was good for 3 days. I was good for a couple days.
A couple days, yeah.
Yeah, I got back from HBS. Couple, yeah, I've been good since then, pretty much. But yeah,
Yeah, nice. What's any recommendations for the audience on something that you've had recently that maybe isn't mainstream that people might want to hear and take a test on?
uh, I am a big fan of. Matter of fact, I have another bottle here that I haven't tried, so I won't mention that. But it's I'm a big fan of Binny's, which is a chain in I guess like Total Wine in other states. It's a chain in Illinois, and
Mm-hmm.
they do what's called store picks, meaning with a distillery they will invite stores to come down and they will set aside barrels for them to taste. So you may have like 5 barrels set aside of like say Wild Turkey 101, and you can go down there and you can taste all these different bourbons and then say I like this one. And they'll take that barrel and they will bottle exclusively for that, and it'll be it'll be their store pick. And so
Nice.
I find that Binny's like they do a really good job with that. So the last one I had that I really liked was Russell's Reserve, which is a wild turkey product. It comes in at about I think 110 proof, and it was really delicious. And so plain wild turkey, but even the 101 is decent. But the rare breed and the Russell's Reserve, that's something I really been into lately. I think that's a really good score. It's like it's right around the Russell's Reserve is around $50, I think. Where we
Nice. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. Well, thanks for the recommendation. I appreciate it. I will definitely check it out. And if you can send me a link to that after the show, that would be awesome.
That's Russell's Reserve single barrel, not the 10-year, which is also good, but not as good in my opinion.
Yeah. Russell's Reserve single barrel. This episode brought to you by Russell's Russell's Reserve single barrel.
But I'm popping some more Michters as we speak.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, keep at it. So keep drinking because the next question is something that might be something you want to have a drink for. So moving along here, Steve. So what's something that is inside your comfort zone that might be outside somebody else's comfort zone? And I'm gonna give a caveat here. And the caveat is that it can't be public speaking. And it can't and it can't be all the things that you would do as a Navy SEAL that most of us would not be in our comfort zone, like swimming underwater with bricks and all the other stuff that you had to do in your time in the military. So nothing military related and nothing to do with public speaking because those are just too easy because those two things by themselves accomplish it. So what's something that's not one of those two things that's inside your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's?
You basically just shaved off every activity. Shoot,
I know.
I guess skiing down a big mountain. I mean, I'm not a super badass skier, but I can ski some pretty steep terrain in most of the North American resorts, and
nice.
So that would probably be a pucker factor maybe for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Our friend Barbara Churchill, who I've had on the show, that was her answer for something that she is not, that is very much outside her comfort zone. She is not a skier. She's from Minnesota, where there's some small ski hills. People ski in Minnesota. It's not like going out to Utah or Colorado or even like Vermont here, but that is exactly the opposite of the answer she gave. She said, not something I do. That's good. So now we're going to flip the script on you. So what's something that is outside of your comfort zone
Uh,
It might be inside of somebody else's.
why, Jason, that would be math in public.
Tell us more, Steve. Tell us
No,
more.
I suck at math. It almost kept me out of the SEAL teams. First, when I came in, I missed the qualification for SEAL by like 2 or 3 points on the military vocational test, and it caused me to not to get training right, not to be able to go to SEAL training. I actually had to go uh, work at a shore facility on submarines in Connecticut for 2 years, and before I could retake the test and then go do it. And then when I was at Buds, it was the closest I got to getting kicked out was I failed the dye physics test the first time, which is just like a whole bunch of word problems, which are the worst form of math for me. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and I got like one of the Naval Academy guys to kind of help me, tutor me up, and then I went back and I passed it. And so, yeah,
Nice. You mentioned Buds. I know what that is because I've read
yeah.
some of the books, and I'm listening to Extreme Ownership right now, which is some of your Navy SEAL brethren. So I know what it is, but for the people in the audience who don't know, can you give a quick description of what Buds is?
Yeah, I still, as a military guy, I try to be mindful of it, but I still let slip the acronyms every once in a while, especially, I got a couple drinks under my belt. So
Sure.
it stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. It's the initial 6 month selection and assessment process for becoming a Navy SEAL.
Gotcha. Great. And I've read about what that entails. So you were good on all that, but when you had to do the actual math for the physics part, that was your challenge.
Oh,
It struck
I
me.
didn't say
Yeah.
I was good at all of it. I was definitely not
You
a star
passed.
performer, but I was good enough, I guess you
Yeah.
could say.
You didn't ring the bell.
Hmm. I did not.
So ringing the bell is what for people that what do you call it? You call it washing out, or what do you call that when people decide not to
The technical
continue?
term is DOR, which stands for drop on request. You go to there is outside the instructor's office. The first phase, Buds is split into 3 phases. The first phase is your physical condition phase, and that's where Hell Week and everything is. That's where all your
Hmm.
basic pool stuff is. Where they used to run you to near death, but there's an office and there's a bell outside of that office. And when you want to quit, you got to go and you got to ring that bell, and then you set your helmet. Everybody has a green helmet with their name and rank on it. And then you go set it down. So if you ever watch like the Discovery Channel stuff, to see all these
Yeah.
helmets towards the end of first phase, all these helmets lined up outside the door. Those are for
Yeah.
those that decided it was no longer for them.
Yeah. And if you ring the bell, can you ever go back again, or is that it?
Uh, if you ring the bell, you can, that you can go do another job, or at least you could. I don't really know what it's like now, but you could go and then go reapply and usually get. So I know guys that have quit and come back successfully, and it's not just quit. There's plenty of other, a lot of guys will get injured. Guys will be performance dropped if they fail things like a dive,
Hmm.
for example. But
For example.
yeah, different things, and they will be, they can reapply if they, you go through the process. If where you are will let you take another shot. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. It seems like there would be a bit of math that you'd have to do besides like those sort of things if you're looking at maps and stuff. But I feel like there's a lot more technology involved where you don't actually have to do math. Not quite so much would strike me.
no, and there was a lot of math, So for example, I remember like the math was challenging. I went through sniper school. You would have uh, you'd have different holistic formulas. You would have a way of doing basically distance calculations, looking through they're called the dots in your scope, and measuring how
Hmm.
far away something is by its size in the scope. And then you would go through this formula. And so that was challenging, right? When you're writing, I think a lot of my problem was just being such a messy writer, writing it all out. But then
Hmm.
would when I went through breacher school, where you do a lot of explosive calculations, and that's a lot of complicated math. You have the
Yeah.
formula already on like a cheat sheet, and then you have a calculator. So it's pretty easy at that point.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. So, public speaking, we already talked about public speaking. We know that you not only speak in public and speak as part of your career, but you actually are a fellow at Heroic Public Speaking. So, you're obviously an accomplished speaker. You help other speakers be good at their craft. So, I gave you 5 minutes and you get to deliver a speech to the world. What would you give your speech on and why?
It's I think one of the most important things is recognizing the fact that there are going to be so many challenges we're going to face in our professional and our personal lives. And I think if we can just from the outset recognize what those challenges are and recognize that we are going to have to persevere through it, and that if we just give ourselves a problem or a problem solving process that we can apply both holistically and consistently, meaning holistically in the sense that for every significant challenge that we face, there's a multitude of factors that go into the outcome of that situation. How committed we are to something, how well we can perform in the situation under high levels of stress, and how good we are at learning from the things that have happened to us and using those to
Hmm.
be better prepared for the next time. And I think that's the holistic part. The consistent part is knowing that the most extreme example, like for me, that would be like combat in my previous life, but also dealing with the stresses of family life. And so
Hmm.
being able to take the things that are good at one thing and use them to succeed, in the other situation. I think you can do that and you should do that. And so again, that's a lot, to pack into a 5-minute talk, but I would essentially say have a holistic and a consistent process for facing challenges in your life.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's something actually in my coaching work with clients where we have a saying, and you may have heard this before. How it goes in one area of your life is generally how it goes in all areas of your life. I think and that can be used positively or negatively. So what you say there is, if you're consistent in your job and you bring the same things you know about in your job and you bring it to your home life, you're likely going to be successful there. I know me personally, in the past, I was like really good at my job, and then I'd come home and I wasn't like as good as a husband or a parent or whatever it was. So not I wasn't, and there was a lack of consistency. So if I could bottom line what you just said, it's like consistency in your decision making process across all areas of your life equals high performance in all areas of your life.
And that's exactly right, because those are the experiences that you described for yourself were exactly my experiences as well. I could sit there and I can go to combat and not to say that I couldn't have done better in my leadership stuff, but I could perform well and do what I needed to do. And then I'd come home and just not be the leader in my house that
Hmm.
my family needed me to be, that I should be, in terms of like just kind of just not losing my mind about the dumbest shit. And so
Yeah.
that's why it resonates with me so much now, because of the failure that I felt because of that. That now I
Hmm.
realize how important it is and how I try to let that shape how I approach situations now, and how I really try to impart that onto other people
Yeah.
and
That's
organizations.
cool. Well, what's cool about this question for you is this speech that I've asked you to give to the world. I know that this is a speech you're actually going to give on your TED Talk, or when I see you doing this in front of a corporation or at a large sales conference, because I know this is specifically the audience you talk to. So I'm excited to hear this speech because I know you already have it in you, which is really cool.
Yeah, I've given versions of that, and it continues to evolve. Um, but yeah, you find ways to constant improvement, but yeah, generally that's what I talk about. And obviously, there's other things that I discuss as well, if I want to put it in a more of a leadership type of context. But yeah, generally those are the things that I believe in. Those are the things that are really, really important to me. Those are the things that I believe enabled me to have a successful 27-year career in the community in which I served. And so those
Hmm.
are the things I really am, really want to drive to other people. And that's what I'm passionate about. That's what lights me up, is being able to take those things that I know to be true as far as is being able to perform in high stakes situations and giving those to other people.
Yeah. So if there's somebody listening right now who struggles with consistency, and I think there's a lot of us, myself included, where would you recommend that they start? Where do you
Uh,
start to build more consistency in your life?
I like that you asked me that question. I definitely, it's an easy one for me, and that is clarifying your objective. And so,
Mm,
that sounds very obvious. And a lot of things, that I'm not, I'm not planting some flag here with the concepts that I talk about, but I assemble them in a way that you get that holistic approach. And the first thing is it's like that, that cliche, anything worth doing isn't easy, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
if it's important to you, whether it's professional goals, whether it's a golf game, whether it's kind of just being a better parent, being a better husband or wife, it's being really committed, but really taking the time to reflect on exactly what that means. When I say I'm committed to something, what does that mean? And walk that process all the way out. And the very first step of that is clarifying your objective, is really being able to identify kind of what that desired end state looks like, what that finish line looks like for you. Like very viscerally, you've got to really be able to visualize that. And from there, you've got to construct the roadmap, comprised of that, short, intermediate, and long-term goals all the way towards that desired end state.
Mhm. Oh man, I appreciate that. Then in coaching, we call that your what for. When you're making decisions and you're out here doing all sorts of stuff, and we're all, most everybody's busy making decisions. Like, what's your what for? Like, what's your like? The question I ask my clients a lot is, what's your higher commitment? What are you actually committed to? Oh, I'm committed to being a better parent. I'm committed to being a better husband. I'm committed to being a better friend or a more loyal coworker, and then looking at how the decisions you're making actually serve that versus not. And like, I've never served in the military, but I can imagine in the military, it's, you kind of know your objectives to a point,
Mhm.
but you were in leadership in the military, so you actually set the objectives, and then it's getting people along on your team to move towards those, move in the same wavelength, and move in this as a team to meet those objectives.
Well, I think it's obviously beyond the scope of the podcast, but I think where a lot of people fail is they don't give the level of specificity into what that looks like. So if they say, "Hey, I want to be a better leader," okay, well, what does that mean? When you say I want to be a better leader, let's walk that out and say, okay, when I'm a better leader at work, it means that I'm more engaged with everybody within my sphere of influence. My direct reports, my peers and my superiors alike. And so what does that look like? All right, well, with my direct reports, for example, I'm going to make sure that I have at least twice a week with each person that I can affect, obviously depending on the echelon of leadership, but within each person I directly affect, I'm going to have at least two meaningful engagements with that person where I'm going to give them succinct and specific feedback that they can action. And so
Yeah,
that's an example, is really walk it out and that's when I say clarify your objective, is have that level of specificity in your
yeah,
goal.
yeah. Thanks, Steve. So, Steve, this is the part of the show where we get to learn a little bit more about you. And we've actually learned a lot about you so far. We know that you're a Navy SEAL. We know that you're a father and a husband, originally from the East Coast. You live in Chicago now. We know that you're not a math fan. And by the way, I hate math too. Probably one of the reasons that we're both in like speaking professions, because
Right.
like talking and listening, not so, I hate math as well. Um, so yeah, I guess I just like to offer to you, like, share your journey with us to where we are sitting here today.
I feel like I've covered a lot of that already. But I'll go back to, I'll give you one thing is, I look at a lot of my friends. A lot of my friends were my heroes because I feel like they've done, in their service a lot more than I have, and a lot of it's just timing and circumstances and stuff like that. And I've seen my share of combat, and you know I've enjoyed it. Honestly, I know people that's weird for many of your listeners to say to hear, maybe, but I did. I enjoyed my time kicking indoors and getting after the bad guys. That's
Hmm.
what we live for in the SEAL teams. But I feel like when I look back at my body of work and my contribution to the country, to the Navy, to my community, it's really the training. That's the stuff, the people that I was able to train, the young leaders that I was able to develop. That's really what I think my most significant contribution was. It's not just any individual, target that I assaulted or anything like that. It's that. And that last program that I worked for the Navy is probably my most significant. I never thought about it. I came up to boot camp, and my original job when I came up to the Navy's boot camp was to be what we call the dive motivator, which is essentially to provide training, progressive run and swim, and mentoring training to the young candidates. Male and female candidates would come in that would want to be SEAL candidates, or special warfare combatant crewmen, which are boat drivers and naval special warfare, and then air rescue swimmers, explosive ordnance disposal divers, and then divers themselves. They would have a contract, and so we would give them progressive run and swim training to get them faster on their feet, more comfortable in the water. It's all that job was painfully easy, painfully.
Mm.
It was not at all challenging. But then I got thrown that job that I described earlier of warrior toughness to make sailors tougher, and stepping away, that probably was my biggest impact to the Navy. So it was completely unexpected, and so
Mm.
looking back, that's what I'm probably the most proud of is the people I was able to develop. And I learned a lot. In each respective leadership position that I had in the military, I would get finished it and would say, "Shit, man, I wish I had that to do over again. I could have done it so much better." Um, but it's given me, but being reflective in that process of having the humility to kind of say, "Yeah, man, you screwed that up. You could do this a lot better." I really feel like it's set me up to really kind of dissect those things and again translate them to other people so they can learn from a lot of my mistakes, and also the successes that I've been a part of, whether my own or the ones that I've observed from the leaders that I've had and the teammates that I've had.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you uh question that comes up for me is, well, first of all, the thing that I want to say is thank you. And from what I know of you and what you're sharing on the podcast tonight, the work that you're doing and that you did up until a few weeks ago is good, like an ongoing legacy. As you are no longer actively in the military, you've laid the groundwork for future leaders to come in, and I'm sure there's people that are taking over your work and they're going to build on it, iterate on it. But you've laid the groundwork so that in the future, the new Steves of the world, the new Jasons of the world who come into the military get to actually enjoy and participate in the experience that you had and the leadership that you brought to those things. So thank you for that. The question I had for you is, if it's likely we've got audience members listening tonight who are in the military, maybe specifically in the Navy, who are considering being a Navy SEAL, or maybe if you're, in the Army, it's the Rangers, and I'm not an expert on this, you would be. What advice or what coaching would you give to somebody who's listening, who's thinking about taking that next step in their military career and going into like one of the, the units that's very hard to get through the training and become like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody like that?
For them to first really know what they're getting into. It's a hard life, in terms of family and marriage, and and I can't speak for I've worked with the Rangers, worked with the Army Special Forces. They very hard selection processes and very capable units themselves. But I can't speak directly to their training. I know a little bit about it. I'm certainly not an expert on that, but from my experience, it's you see the recruiting commercials where it's all sex and guys jumping out of planes and blowing shit up, but there's a lot of other really hard work that goes into it, and you're not always going to be on the sexy combat deployment. You're going to be on the crappy deployment when you're in a third world country training some people up while your friends are over there doing fun stuff and you're sitting there gritting your teeth and sucking it
Yeah.
up. And so really understanding though that you've got to think of something greater than yourself. And it took me a while to realize that, and there's a maturity level that and a sense of wisdom that comes with that. But it's understanding that it really is, it's become a cliche in our community almost now, but it's really about the brotherhood. When I was at Buds, when I went to SEAL training, it was all about like, I wanted to be a SEAL to say I've done it and gone through the hardest training. And I thought I'll be cool to paint your face and crawl around. And then when I was there, I realized that none of that was enough to keep me there. through that training. It was
Mm.
when I looked to the people around me, I realized these are the best people that I've ever met. These are the most capable people that I've ever met. And these are the people that I want to be around, and that's what kept me in. And so that's really what it's about. If you can get on board with the brotherhood and serving at the highest level, uh, you know, do it for the right reasons. And once you commit to it, be completely relentless in the pursuit of it, because you're going to want to quit. You're going to want to find something easier to do, but you just got to stay completely committed to that path.
Yeah. And if you stay committed to the path, the reward is there.
Right.
Yeah. Great. What was your, keeping anonymity here and everything? What was your favorite part about being a SEAL? Besides the brotherhood, obviously, like, what was your favorite part about the job itself, other than the people you worked with?
I guess just the constant, you know, constantly seeking improvement, constantly trying to get better, just going out there and challenging yourself, constantly doing hard stuff. I don't know if people necessarily realize it, but, we succeed on the battlefield because of, how deliberate we are in just getting after the basics and doing the very basic things over and over and over again. And we train very, very hard. And one of the reasons why the life is hard for families is, before we go out on that 6-month deployment, we're gone a hell of a lot. We're gone 3 to 5 weeks, home for 1 week, and then out the door. And that's before we even deploy. That's
Yeah.
on the road training all over the United States to do the things that we can't do locally. And it's, and I, but while you're doing that, especially as a single guy, when I was a single guy, I don't even want to be home. I just want to be gone.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I love training. I love being gone. I love seeing new stuff. Um, I got to climb above the Arctic Circle in Norway, a skydiving trip in Denmark, and learning how to race cars and shooting at these incredible shooting schools, and the Navy teaching me how to ski in Colorado. I mean, it's, great. That's the fun stuff. Those are the things
Yeah.
that I look back at, and man, I was like, man, that stuff was fun. And of course, there's another side of that where there's things, where they're not as glamorous, where,
Yeah.
sucking it up and you're cold and you're miserable. And so, yeah, that happens too.
Yeah. When I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, that sounds like the James Bond spy school. Skydiving, skiing, like some exotic, like Arctic, like snow evil empire base. But yeah,
Yeah.
like obviously my understanding is there's actually a lot of sitting around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and and it's like, I look at all the, the combat, the direct action missions we would do. And so many of them where you're so amped up and you go in and you put so much effort into it and you go, and it's just what you're looking for is not there. And you come home empty handed and you're like, shit. And that happened a lot, and so, and there's plenty of times where, I always say, and people, it would be very, I could easily say, oh man, I led men in combat, and but for my heroic leadership, we would have failed. But honestly, leading SEALs in combat, when they're engaged in the enemy, it's a factor of grabbing them by the reins and pulling them back. You don't need to inspire them. You don't need to motivate them. They can't wait to be unleashed and go after it. But the leadership challenge happens when you are sitting around, when the missions start to dry up, when you're, the conflict reaches a level of maturity where now it's more about pushing out the foreign, the indigenous forces to take lead on things, and you're sending fewer guys out, and you're not, becomes more about building their capacity and less about the actual, people you're going after in some cases. And so that becomes very frustrated. That becomes a challenging situation in which to lead.
Yeah. So what, I mentioned that I'm reading or listening to a book right now by a couple of Navy SEALs. And one of the things I didn't realize, like as a non-military person, I think of like Zero Dark 30 and SEAL Team 6 and like, oh my God, this is so glamorous. We got Bin Laden and all these things. I didn't realize that part of the mission in the mid 2000s, you're actually paired up with Iraqi soldiers who are not trained like SEALs and actually mostly didn't want to be there, had subpar weapons, subpar body armor, and most of all, subpar training. And you actually had to be out with them and teach them how to be better soldiers. So you're leading them as well, so that you can leave, so that you can come back and retire and be with your family, so that they can actually be there and hold the country for themselves. So I didn't, I guess, like at a high level, I maybe kind of understood that, but like hearing those details, it's not all glamorous. It's not all sexy. I can imagine. Yeah.
No. But
Yeah.
it's again, it's just it's about the people you're with. It's that high caliber of personnel. But you're 100% right. It's a lot of and the guys, especially the younger guys, have a really hard time with it. And especially when and it's one thing when you're at least going into battle with the Iraqis or the Afghans, but when you're going to another place, going to some other country where you're not even going into combat and you're just living, getting sick off the food, and you ask guys to go through this incredibly hard selection process, and now and they're gone, and they're compromising their family lives, and now it becomes it takes really strong leadership to kind of revalidate their sense of purpose and to why what they're
Yeah.
doing is important, even if they don't feel like it is. And that's
Yeah.
that's the biggest challenge of being a SEAL leader.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Steve. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. And I think that's some great advice for people that are considering a role similar to a SEAL. And I'm going to take a quick pause and pour myself another drink because it's time for me to get on the hot seat.
All right.
So I'm
Well,
going to need a.
while you do that, I'm actually going to open up something else. I'm going to open up
Excellent.
a Four Roses single barrel.
Ooh, I like Four Roses. Yeah.
It's it's a Benny's pick, it's a store pick. And so this is cask strength, meaning it comes right out of the barrel. So it's 52%, so it's 104 points.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's a 40%, so it's an 80 proof, that normal whiskey. So that's a strong drink.
Get that cork up.
Woo, smell that. So as you're pouring that, this is the part of the show where we flip the script, and you get to take over as the host, and I get to be the guest, and you get to ask me anything you'd like, and I will answer it. And so, Steve, what would you like to ask me about?
Well, so I don't. All right. So when we spent a lot of time talking together, and and I think the last time we had met before this last session in a couple weeks ago was last year.
Last February.
Yeah, we're doing some filming in New Jersey, and you came down, and I remember being in in grad school, and I'm like Jason, I love having you here. We're hanging out. You're a great dude, but why exactly are you here? Because you were like, I'm still doing my thing. I'm doing I'm going back to do my job, and I was like, all right, well, man, you kind of it was a big commitment. And then I find out that you're doing your coaching thing, and I was like, well, all right, right on. That sounds good. I know you took anytime you do something like that, anytime you leave the comfort of a job, and hey, I feel like I know it better than most. I've had one job since I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
I just am like, okay, well, the month of December, I am not getting paid at all. So I'm like, all right, I need to, yeah. Anyway, I say that to say that I was excited that you decided to go out on your own and do coaching. So I want to hear that journey from you, and I want to hear some of the anxiety that you faced, and I'm sure that you probably still wrestle with as many of us do who are starting off something new. So I'd like to hear your kind of synopsis of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've never talked about this on the show, so this is perfect. So, I won't share the whole journey, but it's probably May of 2018. I had this feeling of like a lack of sense of purpose. I'm also a father. My daughter's amazing. I've talked about her in the show. My wife is amazing. The marriage is good. I live where I want to live. We have a great life. Like I really have no complaints. Like good family life, good, amazing friends. And yet something was missing for me. So I actually hired a coach in June of 2018. And I wasn't sure why, like specifically, but I was like, oh, this feels like the right thing to do. And through the work with her, hi Taryn, if you're listening, her name is Taryn, she's amazing. Um, we uncovered, like, it was my work. Like I just didn't, I didn't care is what it came down to. I cared about the paycheck, like you said, and I cared about the people. So I've been very fortunate my whole career. I've always worked with great people. I've actually worked at great companies. So it's nothing like I've never had an experience where I'm like, oh, the company was terrible or I had a terrible boss. It was more like, and I don't know, and I think this might be something that maybe in the military you don't struggle with as much, but I never felt aligned to what I actually wanted to create or what my what for was. My what for was weak. My what for was to make money and use that money to like have a good life. And I didn't really care about the rest of it. So
Hmm.
all that to be said, when I had this weird premonition that I should go do heroic public speaking. As we know, heroic public speaking is a big time commitment financially, time. It's a lot of time, and I decided to do it anyway. And at the same time, yeah. So heroic public speaking, it's a time commitment, it's a financial commitment. Again, like I'm a family guy. Like I've got like bills to pay and family to take care of as well. But I decided to do it, and this is kind of a funny thing that I've talked about with a couple other guests on here, is why heroic public speaking, and I didn't really know why. Like I was not. I had this idea in my head of, hey, like I love public speaking. I think I'm very mediocre at it, and I just don't practice it enough. Well, podcast, it's a good way to practice your public speaking. And it just felt right. So I went with my gut on it. And then at the same time, through the work of my coach, Taryn, I decided that I wanted to learn how to be a professional coach. I didn't know what for. I didn't know if I wanted to do it full time, if I wanted to, it's a great leadership skill. I'm sure you do a ton of coaching when you were, a ton of coaching when you were
Right.
leading people.
Yep.
And so I wanted to do that as well. So I actually decided to take those both on at the same time. Not at the same time in terms of the logistics, but at the same time, I made the decision to do those two things: significant investment in time, significant investment in money. And all that to be said, for me, HPS, heroic public speaking, what I got out of it was the confidence that I can be in a room with a Steve Drum or a Michael Hudson or a Michael Port, and I can hang out and we're all just human beings, because the world that I came from, there's not people like that. Like I worked in the sales world where everybody was kind of the same. And I was one of the many people who did their job and did it pretty well. Sometimes I did, kind of like you, like sometimes I really kicked ass, and other times I'm like, oh, I could have done that a lot better. But I kind of came from this homogenized world of like corporate sales. And so what it built for me was a ton of confidence that, hey, like you and I are friends with people that like speak on stages for 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand. They're famous in the space they're in, and I could call them up tomorrow and get them on the phone and talk to them and have them on the podcast. So it gave me a ton of confidence there, and it drastically increased my skills. So I didn't know that going into it. And by trusting myself, what I got out of it was worth way more than what I spent on it, in my opinion. The friendships that I built, the network I built, the skill that I have. Like if I'm called upon to speak somewhere now, even if I don't have content, I don't know if this happens for you. Like I'll stand up and just like channel like heroic public speaking of like just like yes and be yourself. Like it happens to me all the time. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. I'll hear like Michael and Amy like and Mike Canino and Chloe and all the people, all the amazing staff there, just like just get up and do your thing and you're good. Just be yourself. Yes and it. So that was the heroic public speaking thing. The coaching thing I didn't really know either. So I wanted it because I liked being coached and I thought I would be a good coach.
Right.
But I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. So I'm like, oh, this sounds like a good side hustle. It sounds like a really good corporate skill to have. And then in June, I decided to go and do it full time because I actually built up a nice little practice pretty quickly. Found some great clients. And if you're listening, thank you, because some of them might be listening. And in June, I left my corporate job and I took a month off. And then in July, I was like, okay, it's kind of like where you're at now. Like, oh, this is real. Like, there ain't no paycheck coming in every 2 weeks anymore. I know you got a military pension. I don't have anything like that. I'm
Yeah.
literally having to create my business on the fly. So your question about the anxiety that I get is 19 years of having it be one way. And suddenly, by my own decision, that's not the way anymore financially. And now I get to create my revenue. So it's up and down as you'll find out as you're out here doing your thing. You'll have months where you'll get 3 or 4 contracts, and that'll be 3 or 4 months worth of salary for you.
Yeah.
And there'll be a month or two where you won't get any calls back. And that's just kind of the way it goes when you start. Because as you're new into the space, you're gonna be having to sell yourself a lot. So the anxiety that I get is, where's my next dollar coming from? Where's my next client coming from? When is this client that it says they love me going to refer me? I think this is a common thing in the speaking industry too,
Yeah.
right? Where you're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, your speech is the best thing ever. And you're like, great. Who can you refer me to? They're like, well, nothing. Like, have you ever asked somebody after you give them a speech, like, hey, can you refer me? And then they don't do it, even though they say they love you.
Or just, or also like testimonials, it's somebody, they like you, they may even be
Yeah.
your friend and they've seen you and they believe in your work and they like your work. And it's just like, all right, well, yeah, yeah. And it's not that they don't want to do it. It's just that it falls out low, on the priority list sometimes. And I think it's
It's low on the priority list.
the same thing with referrals. And sometimes it's a factor of they just maybe just don't know how to deftly, you know, do that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So the other thing that is a little bit of anxiety, but also really, really fun that I'm excited for you to explore and have on your adventure is, man, you lived in a place of pretty specific structure. Like you inside of your like, I think of the highway. Inside your highway, like obviously Navy SEALs get to operate inside your highway any way you want for the most part, but you've got a pretty specific highway. You have no highway anymore. You can do whatever you want. And now I wake up every day and I go, what do I want to create today? What do I want to do today? Who do I want to talk to today? Do I want to do a podcast episode?
mhm,
Do I want to go out and find a new client? Do I want to go to a networking meeting? Do I want to like stay home and go to a movie, which I'm doing tomorrow? Like, do I want to go with my buddy to a movie tomorrow? And you get to make those choices, which in the past, as people that work for other people, you don't get to make those choices. I mean,
that's
you
funny.
get to make those choices. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was working. I was doing something Saturday, um, with a charity that I work with, and I'm like, so it's Saturday. Fortunately, my son didn't have a game that day, so I didn't have to miss that.
Yeah.
And so I went down to the city, and I'm doing that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm giving up my Saturday. Can I go? I need to ask the boss if I can like make up this day and like maybe chill out on Wednesday or do something. And I'll have to ask the boss. And, and the boss actually is my wife now, so I got to. But no,
Well,
it's
we're very clear about that. That your boss is actually the wife. Your
yeah,
wife is actually the boss here.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
no, it's funny. Yeah, exactly. It's and I need to do that. I feel like I'm in a position right now where I just kind of I'm about to take a couple weeks down with the family for the holidays, and then
Yeah.
from January, just like everybody else on the planet, and be getting after it with full intensity.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of my journey to where I am today, talking to you on the podcast. So now today in about 5 months, I've created a coaching practice. I've got some amazing clients. Always on the hunt for more, just like you're always on the hunt for more speaking engagements and opportunities there. I've got this podcast now, which is amazing. And I've got some other things I'm working on for the new year, including speaking. So as you're out speaking for money, we'll connect again and hear how it's going for you, because I have some things I want to speak on as well. So Steve, I appreciate the question. That was a good one. A little bit vulnerable for me. I'm glad I had an extra drink there, but
Yeah, yeah. No, it's
happy
good.
to share it with you. Happy to share it with you and
No,
the audience.
no, it's good because and it's what I like about podcasts like this, and even I like I like listening to this Steal the Show podcast with Michael,
Yeah, Michael.
because they there's speakers out there and they're making a ton of money, and they're very they're very revealing in kind of their struggles and what they had to deal with. And I think it's important because I think it's like, hey, guess what, you know there's a lot of us that don't have it completely figured out, right? But we have a
Yeah.
lot. We have a lot that we can offer the world. Um, but it's nice. It's like these people that go out and they post on social media nothing but perfection, and you're like, what's the value to the world that you're giving right now with all your perfect little pictures and your perfect lives.
Yeah.
You know that that's not really the case. And so
Yeah.
it's great, when you have people who can authentically come out there and say, yeah, yeah, this is the path. It wasn't working
Yeah.
anymore. And so I decided to do something new. And that's the American spirit, right? Is going
Yeah,
out there
totally.
exactly as you described, is like, hey, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this rat race right now. I've got a lot to offer the world, and I'm going to go be a pioneer and do something great. So good on you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, just to wrap up my little section here, I think the going back to like why heroic public speaking, the other thing it gave me, other than like I can hang with the people that I admire, because I always had a story about myself, like I'm just one of like a million sales guys selling software. Like there's a million people like me. One of the things I realized, like everybody's just a human being.
Mhm.
Like, we've got people that we're friends with, and I'm going to have on the show. They've got 2 million Facebook followers, and they're like best-selling authors, and they're people that are doing incredible things. And when you talk to them, they're just normal people who have the same needs, they have the same worries, they have the same stresses, they have the same anxiety, and they all started somewhere. Like nobody who's on the stage that is speaking for money, that like as a speaker that you look at like, oh, that's who I want to be. Man, they had to grind it out to get there. Like everybody grinds it out.
Yep.
There's nobody who gets anything handed to them when it comes to being a solopreneur, because it's really just you, and you got to build what you got. But so yeah, so thanks for the question, Steve. I really appreciate that. So taking the reins back from you,
All right.
which I'm glad you're virtual, because I wouldn't want to do that in person, because I feel like you'd break my arm. So you're obviously a really passionate guy. Obviously that comes out. What are you passionate about specifically?
I already alluded to it. That's the problem. Is like I go there and I go on my 10-minute diatribe there, and then I realize that I've like nothing else to talk about now. No,
That's not true at all.
so right, of course, guys like us, we always have something to talk about, right? But
Yeah. Oh yeah.
no, I think it's just the things that I figured out the hard way. I'm already, I'm circling back to some of the things I mentioned before, but it's what I'm passionate about. It's things that I learned the hard way, through wisdom, through experience, through failure, that I realized it's like people can benefit from this. This is, these are things that, and it's not because I'm some genius and put it together. It's because I learned from the other people. I learned from the people that are quiet and in the shadows, and I'm willing to come out and say, hey, these are the things that I think are effective, that I know to be effective in this arena. And I also know that because, as you mentioned, we're all just humans, that they're going to be effective over here for these problems. A lot of times, people look and they say, oh, you're a Navy SEAL, and you're going to equate being shot at to me trying to close this deal, trying to make this pitch. And yes, got it. 100%. Yes, the stakes are higher when human life is directly on the line. But at the end of the day, what's most important to you in that immediacy is you've got to succeed in that moment, and that's what's the most important thing. You're not always like, we don't live in a life where we're constantly comparing. Oh, I could always have it worse. It could always be harder. No, it's like, this is important to me right now, and it's causing me stress if I don't deliver. And so it's like, yeah. You absolutely can take the lessons, for example, you take the lessons on a battlefield in terms of, emotional regulation and preparation and, agility, and you can apply them in other situations and be successful because of it. And so I'm passionate about bringing that, about making people understand that, at the end of the day, your brain doesn't sit there and say, well, when you're stressed and you got to give a pitch and your job is on the line, it doesn't say, well, you know what, I could be in Iraq getting shot at right now. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Your brain works the same way, and that's what I want people to
Totally.
understand. So yeah.
Yeah, man. No, I thinking to my sales career, it's actually true. Like when you're at the end of the quarter or the end of the year, and you've got a number to hit, and you've got a boss who's like, for me, I've always worked for great bosses, but the pressure's on. It doesn't quite feel like life and death, but it's extremely high stress.
It might as well be, because that's your world right then and there.
That's right. Exactly.
That's your world,
Exactly.
and that's what matters to you. When you Yeah, and so it's like the same thing now. I mean, I'm not getting shot at, but I got to worry. I got to make sure that I'm successful. I've got a family
Yeah.
that's depending on me. So That's what's important right now. And so that's how I approach it. That it's
Yeah.
I approach it the same way, quite frankly.
Yeah. I want to ask you one question about this specifically. And I've seen you speak on this, but I think physiologically, the brain, it's actually the same. Your brain actually addresses a life threatening situation and a high stakes situation. And biologically and physiologically, it's actually the same thing, right? Like your brain doesn't know the difference.
In many cases, your brain doesn't discern the difference between that actual danger sometimes and the other danger because it's like it's a cliche, and it was like there's that study, right? It was completely kind of taken out of context where they said the number one fear is public speaking, right? And which it let's just say it's a huge fear among many people. Like if you're going to go up and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're going to have to give a talk that you're unprepared for in front of 1,000 people, it's going to cause you a very, very high degree of anxiety. And in many cases, if you're not comfortable with it, you could potentially lock up because
Sure.
it's that same physiological fight, flight, or freeze response. It's your amygdala. It's that reptilian part of your brain that wants to say, "Hey, we're gonna freeze so the T-Rex doesn't see us," right? So yeah, so to a large degree, that is true, right? I mean, that is true that to give your best performance, you need to do the same type of techniques and practices and preparation to make sure that because you do something very important, and if you're going to be embarrassed or if you're going to be caught unprepared, it's going to cause you to be thrown out of the saddle
Yeah.
mentally, and so it's the same thing, really.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks for expanding on what you've been talking about the whole time. Like your message is very consistent throughout it, and I appreciate you building on what we've been talking about the entire episode. So moving along here, this. I don't know if this is going to be an easy thing for you or a hard thing for you, but I want to hear what's the thing that you're most proud of.
It's really hard to you've got to compartmentalize that a little bit, right? I mean, you've got to to me it's and I know it's cliche and you feel like you're speaking to, oh, well, what if my wife hears this podcast, right, but no, in reality there's the family component, right? It's everything associated with what your family does, what you've done, like the fact that that I have a wife that's willing to stick with me through all the the bullshit that I put her through, and I've got kids that my son, he struggles academically sometimes, and he's playing hockey and he's been injured, like he's had two different injuries that's taken him out of like most of the season, and now he's finally like he's coming around and he's successful and he's doing really, really well. That makes me very, very proud of him. I see him like bang out two goals in one game, and I tell you what, Papa couldn't be any prouder, really. You know,
I'll
um,
bet. Yeah.
and that's really that. I really feel that kind of that sense of pride. Um, but again, it's as I mentioned earlier, from the personal accomplishment piece. It's I'm proud of my career, and for all the things that I did right, for all the things that and there's disappointments, right? There's things that I wish I could have done that I missed out on. Um, but when it's all said and done, I'm very proud of my 27-year career. I'm proud of the people that I was able to develop, and it's even the little things, right? It's even the times that I look back and I'm like, I could go home right now, um, but I'm gonna stay really, really late because I need to get this guy recognized. I need to write him up for a package that's going to get him potentially promoted. And I'm proud did that kind of work and got that person recognized, things like that. That's what I'm proud of. And so, it's just two different things.
Yeah. Nice, man. That's awesome. You want to get a little bit vulnerable at this point?
I mean, I've got a bunch of bourbons under my belt right now.
Perfect. I love it.
So we'll see.
Perfect. Well,
Now,
we'll see.
now is the best opportunity.
Yeah. So this is the part of the show where Jason makes a Navy SEAL cry. Maybe not. Maybe not quite cry. But so the question I have for you, Steve, is what is something that you are afraid might actually be true about you? And I'm going to nix the whole math conversation because we've already established that that is true about you, which is fine. So, yeah, what's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
So if you remember, I don't know, 20 minutes ago or so when we discussed, that whole consistency piece, right? You and I both had that common thread where we said, hey, we could succeed. As I say, I always like to talk about being on the X. Being on the X for me is in combat is that most critical point of execution, right? And for you, that would be, your role in sales, whether it's that sales call, that pitch, whatever that looks like for you, right? You basically said how you could excel in that situation, but then you
Yeah.
weren't where you needed to be when you got home, right? And so
Yeah.
at that point, where I'm on the X and I get home and I've got my hand on the doorknob to my front door, and I know that I probably was not as engaged with my wife as I should be. I snapped at the kids more so than I needed, and so I've gotten so much better at that because of the practices that I put into place. But at the end of the day, I still worry when I look back. I look back at my body work in the military. I'm afraid potentially, when I look back at my body of work as a parent, in 10 years, it's always a fear that maybe I'll come up short.
Mm. Second part of this question, which will be a surprise. How do you compensate for that thing that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
And it's the same thing that I recommend to other people is I've got to look back and I got to say, okay, so what are what are the interventions in terms of like you would provide for
Yeah.
for a human resources problem, right? What are the interventions that put into place, right? But no, I
Yeah.
say, okay, well, what does that look like? And because you deal with the teenagers, right? You deal with all of a sudden it's your buddies with dad and we're doing stuff, and now you got the sullen teenager that all he wants to do is play video games and be grumpy and do his thing. It's like, all right, despite that, what can I do to be effective to lead him? And daddy's little girl who's 10 years old, who's the sweetest thing on earth, you know, I've got to be ready. I've got to be ready for her teenage years.
I believe they call that, I believe in the term battle preparedness.
Yes, yes. And so I've got to be deliberate. I've got to be deliberate in looking at, okay, for me to be a father that's effective, that's loving, but also effective, that's firm and gives my kids what they need to succeed in the world. What does that look like specifically? And
Yeah.
how do I make sure that I exert the discipline required to do that? You know, and so
Yeah.
that's what it's going to take.
Damn it. No tears. I don't think there's any tears here. I
That'll,
tried.
that'll be in 10 years.
Exactly. We'll have you back on the show in a few years when your daughter's a teenager, and then you can interview me in 10 years when my daughter's a teenager, and that's when we'll cry because
Or
it'll
I
be
can
like,
go, or I can go upstairs and watch a Hallmark Christmas special, and that'll
there you
probably
go. Oh, is that your kryptonite?
yeah.
Hallmark Christmas special. I'm just like I just had this image in my head of a bunch of like ultra tough like Navy SEALs and Marines like chilling somewhere over Christmas, and they're like, "Hey guys, what do you want to watch?" Drummy's like, "I heard there's a really good Hallmark Christmas special we could probably watch."
I don't know. Holy shit! You should have seen that last HBS graduation where you get these amazing people that just go up there and they share their struggles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I'm like, Michael, you guys got to do a better job of dusting in here. These,
Exactly.
it's my allergies act up.
No, totally. Like the pollen in here got really terrible. It's so weird. It's December, and the pollen is so thick in here that my eyes are just it's totally crazy. Well, thanks for getting vulnerable with us. I appreciate it. So, moving near the end of the show here, you've shared a lot about you kind of your life, your beliefs, what you speak on, how you live your life. So, what would you say your general philosophy on life is, Steve?
Man, that's a broad question. I'm just shooting from the hip right here, and I say that it's at the end of the day, I referenced that Harvard that was I don't know if you remember like months back they talked about that Harvard study. And it was an 80-year study where they said what makes people happy. And
Yeah, I did see that.
ultimately they concluded that it was about the quality of their relationships. And I looked at this
Yes.
and I remember, and I was just sitting on my couch the other day. I'm looking at my wife who decorated the house. Like she's phenomenal at it, and my house looks amazing. And with all of her Christmas decorations, and I'm sitting there and I got the fire on, and I'm like, man. And I'm thinking about, all right, how much money do I have to earn? And I'm just like, at the end of the day, I'm like, I've got to make sure that the biggest investment that I make is in the quality of my relationships. And it's an area that I've taken for granted over the years, because in the SEAL teams, it's like you're best friends with the people that you're with for like this 2-year pop. And
Oh
then
yeah.
then people move on, and you're like, all right, I love this guy to death. But I'm doing my thing, he's doing his thing. And when we see each other in a couple of years down the road, we're like, oh, we pick up where we left off. But now it's really important now that I realize I've got to invest in the relationships, because it really is the difference maker. And so ultimately, that's it. It's not just in terms of friendships, it's not just in terms of family, but it's how you lead. It's like that. And it's people talk about that all the time in leadership. It's transactional leadership versus relational leadership. It's about really creating a culture within your space where people are happy to engage with each other, or
Yeah.
even if, and that engagement looks different to different people, right? You have your introverts, and the intensity and the frequency for that introvert is going to be different than guys like you and me, right? uh,
Yeah.
but it all comes down to those relationships, and that drives everything, because that's what we humans, we're the most social creatures on the planet, and that's what really makes us happiest,
Yeah.
whether we choose to admit it or not.
Yeah. No, I love that. I am my so it's funny you bring up like the whole like introvert extrovert. I'm a 98% extrovert on the Myers-Briggs,
I'm
which
not
is not.
in that.
Yeah, no, anybody who's around me is like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's not
we know
surprising.
about-
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I'm not surprised either, because we've spent like late nights at the bar, and the only people who actually do that are extroverts who actually like want to be around people. Because most everybody else is like, yeah, I need to go home and go to bed. And I'm just like, no, I'm pretty good. I actually had a conversation with uh, somebody that we know at the Salt House in New Hope, which is amazing if you ever go to New Hope.
Yeah,
And like we literally, and
my
I think
favorite
I
my
don't.
favorite hangout for sure.
Oh, it's amazing.
And
It's
Hudson,
gorgeous.
Hudson loves that place, and yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things that around relationships, specifically to what you said, and being extroverted, that I'd like to share with the audience is that they're like, how do you keep doing it night after night? I'm like, because I get all my energy from other people, like literally, which is a blessing and a curse.
I feel like I was there for that conversation.
I think you might have been. You
Yeah.
might have been there for that conversation, but I'm with you. And all that to be said is like we talk about like what's your what for. The big thing for me in life is like connection to people, because I'm an extrovert. On the 5 love languages, I'm a quality time person. Like I'm just like a human. I love human beings for the most part. So when you talk about connecting with your family, connecting with your friends, and maintaining those relationships, you got me thinking. And I missed that for like 38 years of my life. Like I have so many amazing people that I spent time with and that I could still be good friends with, that I'm not. So if you happen to be listening and you know who you are, reach out to me or I'll reach out to you. But it's the same thing. It's like, but I guess my point is here, it's not too late, right? So I've been very intentional over the last 18 months as I've gone through this really amazing transformation to really stay connected with people. Like drive the New Hope and have drinks with people that I care about.
That was awesome. And that's so funny, because I think we don't realize that, people want to see us. People want us in their lives.
Yeah. Oh my
Like,
God, yes.
and when Amber told me, our friend Amber, Amber Villauer from NGNG Enterprises,
What's up,
phenomenal.
Amber?
Yeah,
Amazing.
shout out to her for web design.
And
She's
she'll be
phenomenal.
and she'll be on the show here shortly. So
Yeah, as she should be. Yeah, and so she mentioned that you were coming to town, and I was really excited. I'm like, sweet.
yeah.
I'm like, can't wait to connect with you. And
Yeah.
and I think especially as we get older, we realize, we put more value into just how important that is for us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, yeah, like I think the message that we're both of us are sharing with the audience right now is the action that I would give as a coach is like, who's that person in your life that you need to connect with? Like, it in your heart. You're like, oh, I need to reach out to that person. Go and do it. because I actually like I whiffed on that for a long time because I was so focused on like me, and you got your wife, and then when you have kid or kids. So yeah, just like connecting with people is for me, like that's my thing. That's not everybody's thing, but for me, like people is my thing. I'm a people person, which is why coaching is great because I get to spend all my time with other people doing
Well,
my job.
it's so funny, I was telling Michael Port this, and I was telling I basically, when I graduated from that last fellow session,
Yeah.
I was basically confessing how I felt when I first got to HPS. And I was like, I don't know about this shit. The pledge, I mean, this is kind of,
Yeah.
so they make you stand up, they do a pledge. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about this.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
all about, it's all about community. I was like, I don't need a community. Just teach me some shit. I don't need that.
Yeah.
And then after
Yeah.
I'm there, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, I've got a brotherhood in the SEAL teams, but none of them are there with me right now doing
Yeah.
this. They're not walking this path. They're not going on this journey with me. And yes, I do need a part of this community. I do need people like this in my corner. I do need this area to where I can do things in a safe arena. And so it's like, yeah. And so that's why, I've got my SEAL brothers and other people, but my HPS community, it's like a very special place. And so, you know, I say that really to encourage people to make connections beyond what you think is relevant to you. So you have
Yeah.
your sphere of friends, and a lot of times you realize, you got people that think like you do. They like the same sports teams. They think like you politically, but it's like, you know what? Go outside of that. Connect with people that you wouldn't normally do, and you'll find that it's a highly enriching experience.
Yeah, man. And then when they need something, they know they can call Drummy.
Yeah,
And then when Drummy needs something, hey, I saw on LinkedIn that you're connected to this person at this company that I really want to go and speak at because I think I'd be the perfect speaker to go and do an engagement with them. Or it's the perfect person to train them. You can call them. So it's like yeah, like just to say it again, like this has been a whiff in my life for 38 years of my life. I finally recognized this 2 years ago. But the good news is it's not too late, right? So I've been very intentional about my relationships. It sounds like you are as well. So I think what we're both saying to the audience is like be intentional with maintaining those relationships with people that are great, and they don't have to provide you with anything. It doesn't have to be a value thing. Just good people who
yeah,
you enjoy spending time with, and like it's gonna bear fruit at some point. So
it
yeah,
always
I think
does.
that's great. Yeah, it always does. Whether it be a fun conversation over a podcast and some drinks,
Exactly.
or who knows where it's going to lead. So, well, thanks for sharing your philosophy, Steve. So we're wrapping up the show here, and I'd like to come back here and ask you if there's anything that's come up for you during the episode that you'd like to go back and share with the audience, that like something new that's come up for you, something that I've said, something you said that you would like to go expand upon, or just share with the audience overall.
Man, I felt like this has been a very comprehensive episode. We've done a lot of we've definitely dived deep below the wave tops on a lot of issues. And I think it's, when I look and when we both talked about kind of, you know the anxiety of getting out of our comfort zone, right? It's that, you went out, and we're both in very similar circumstances, right? We're both in our comfort zone, doing what we were doing for a long time, right? 27 years in the military for me, and I think you said 20 years in basically the
Yeah,
sales environment.
yeah,
Um, but being able to say, you know what, if I'm willing to take some risk, there is potential for greatness. There's potential for me to be able to share the things that I've learned. Um, there's people that are going to benefit from the things that I have to offer, and there's benefits for me. And so what I'd say is, I would simply say, take risks in terms of getting outside of your comfort zone. Make, as they would say in HBS, make big choices.
yeah.
Um,
I love that.
make big choices that are in service of other people. And you know I feel like you're gonna definitely reap some rich rewards from that.
Yeah, awesome, man. So I have no doubt that when people listen to this episode, which I'm sure a lot of people will listen to this episode, they're going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to find you and learn more about what Drummy's about, and connect with you. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, it's easy. You can connect with me. Feel free to connect with me through my website. It's steve@stephendrum.com, steve at stephen, drum, drum.com. And so, yeah, I'm also
Cool.
LinkedIn, Stephen Drum. Feel free to reach out, ask me any questions. I'm happy to give you my slice on something.
Yeah, and I'll definitely add those to the show notes as well, so that people have those links to you very easily. And so, last thing I'd love, Steve, is if you left us with words of wisdom with a caveat. So the caveat is that the words of wisdom have to fit on either a post-it note or a computer screen. I know
Yeah.
it's a challenge. I know it's a bit of a challenge for me too. Yeah. So if you got like, let me phrase it in terms of I think you might understand. You're getting ready. You're getting ready. You're getting ready for a, what do you call it? A DM. What's that? Direct engagement. What's it called?
Direct action. Is that what you meant?
Direct. Yes, a DA. You got a DA, and you got to be out there like doing your thing in like 10 seconds. What do you tell people to get them going? Like same thing. Like you got 10 seconds to give the audience something that they can take with them. They're going to remember it tomorrow when they're car riding to work. They're with their family. Like what are the words of wisdom like to the audience?
Well, I won't tell them what I would tell a SEAL. But what I would say is, never miss an opportunity to demonstrate humility. That's it.
Oh man, that's awesome. I that is not what I expected, and I love that. Never miss an opportunity to. Did you say experience humility or
Demonstrate.
demonstrate humility? Wow, that is super cool. That is not what I expected. I love that.
So, I look at it, in terms of, humility is a very important and fundamental tenet of leadership, but it's one that in today's environment is most often overlooked. And so it's a matter of, we talk about being a leader and a coach. When you're a coach, you're down with somebody, you humble yourself to say, these are the mistakes that I made. You humble yourself to say, I may be, like if you look at some of the people that you mentioned, some of the like the icons in the speaking industry, the people that are making, you know, seven figures, 40K a speech, and they will bend over backwards to pick up the phone and help you and sit there and take their time and ask nothing in return to help you find your way. And so people, the more people that kind of use that as a philosophy, that use that as a way of engaging with people, I think the better off we all are.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much for being on today. It was really awesome to have this conversation. I learned a ton about you. I think you probably learned a little bit about me as well as the audience did. So thank you for the questions. I also want to thank you for your service. Like 27 years, I'm doing the math and I'm like, okay, so he was in the shit
Yeah.
on multiple engagements that are happened somewhere around the Middle East. Like there's a couple of engagements that happened. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all the things you did to keep us safe over here. Because like again, like I'm not a military person, and I want to let you know that I appreciate you, and I really want to thank you for being on tonight.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, my service, it's been an honor, and I definitely wouldn't trade it. Um, and yeah, it's been great. I appreciate the friendship, and it's been a real pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me on. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.